title of the topic, which is Adapting and Thriving in the New Tourism Reality. In a moment, we'll unshare that and you'll actually see the beautiful faces of our panelists, and it will be more live and more interactive that way. But before we start, because this is a webinar format for the first time that we've had in the social hour, want to make sure that if you I'm sure everyone's an expert on Zoom already. If not, just in case, feel free to continue chatting if you want in the chat box. But if you have any questions at all, feel free to actually use the Q&A box and forward those questions on, and we will have some time to answer the questions that you may have for our panelists as well. Without further ado, I do know that Seth has a quick moment to talk about why we've started the social hour. So over to you, Seth.
Yeah, thanks, Connie. One of the things that we've really tried to do as a group here, and as Tourism Burnaby, is to give that have that connection to not only our community but the greater community at large. And we've done these social hours now. This is actually week 6, and we've learned a lot during during this this kind of 6-week journey, and I think we're trying different things, and we want to make sure that we're essentially being a service for people during kind of these tough times. And I think one of the things that I just want to share quickly is I appreciate all our hotel partners that are still working really hard every day. And for us, we do understand times are difficult right now, and as a group, and even as the advisory group, we are very happy that a lot of you will join us. And I think that's really kind of the message I want to share. And I appreciate the 5 panelists that are joining us today. And one quick note, just so that before I throw it back to Connie here, and I'll take off this first screen, is if you do have questions, please put it in a Q&A. We do have an option of putting you into a voice question. So if you do have a question, either send me a message through chat or send a message through the chat, and I will put you on to a voice question. So yeah, Connie, if you want to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seth. So wow, you can see my face now. Okay, so the topic is adopting and thriving in the new tourism. And before we go there, I would love for each of the panelists to really self-introduce yourself and really help us understand your current position and how the COVID-19 has impacted your business, as well as how you have pivoted or flexed because of that impact. So we'll start with maybe Chris first.
For sure. Okay, so hello everyone. I know many of you on the call today. I'm the Executive Director for Tourism Burnaby. And as with all of us on the call, we've been deeply affected by COVID-19. My organization in particular is supported primarily by a hotel tax, which with nobody staying in hotels is challenging, and made further so by the fact that provincial government has allowed our accommodations providers to hold on to or defer payment of the tax until later this year, which is defunded our organization. Fortunately, we're in a position with reserves where we can continue operations, and we can do exciting things like this call, but it's definitely as far away from business as usual as I could have possibly imagined 2 or 3 months ago. So in terms of what we do, everything has changed for us. Our KPIs, which were primarily room nights before, those will come back, but for the time being, we've really had to pivot and change what we're doing as a tourism agency. And instead of looking outwards and trying to bring in tourists and business travelers, sports tournaments, that kind of thing to the city in the short term, we've really had to focus on how do we support our stakeholders? How do we keep those businesses that are still open, whether it be hotels or working with our restaurants to find, to help them make those changes to delivery and takeout options and whatnot. So it's been, obviously a really interesting few weeks, and also moving out of our regular offices to being home-based and conducting most of our business on Zoom. So I'm sure not too different from many of you, but each of us has our unique island, I guess, that we're living on right now as we continue. So,
awesome, thank you, Chris. And over to you, Bev.
Well, hi, good afternoon, everybody. And who'd imagine we'd be where we are today, March, 23rd, just several weeks ago. Life has changed, and I don't know if it'll ever change back again. We're truly in a place of uncertainty. I am the CEO with Tourism Kamloops. I've been in the tourism industry over 35 years, from retail to franchising, all over the place. And if you ever would have told me that I would have spent any part of my career telling people to stay at home, that's probably the biggest shift for me right now. Tourism Kamloops, we are in an enviable position, same as Tourism BC, in that we've kind of planned for a rainy day, and right now we are in the middle of a tornado, and those reserves will come in handy. We are about 80 to 85% funded through MRDT funds, and so that's that hotel tax that Chris was referring to. The rest of it is city and some other revenue generating opportunities. We had started YK Strong with our business community here. We felt that there was so much information coming to our business community that Tourism Kamloops could really become a leader in the community and speak to and be that source of information within. And it's really grown legs, and to the point that, they're even mentioning it at City Hall during council meetings and stuff on how, we've really stepped up, and not just with the tourism community, but to be responsible and a resource for our entire community. We really, our messaging right now is to stay at home, stay safe, and really support local wherever we can. We are, looking at virtual experiences with the BC Wildlife Park and wine tasting, a lot of what some other DMOs are doing, and we're just looking for any way to engage and keep Kamloops top of mind for when it is safe and responsible to start inviting people back into our community. We have to make sure that we're honoring our social responsibility and that we're taking care of the people and the natural resources that we have. I think Kamloops is very well positioned for recovery, as we are a drive market. We're a smaller center, or even our brand speaks to no crowds. So we're really looking forward to the time when we can start to invite people back into our community. And I think we're well aligned to welcome guests back sooner than later. So thank you for your time today, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Bev. And over to Christina.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christina Northcott. I'm the Senior Manager of Conference and Events at Canada Health Infoway. So I'm going to speak to two different worlds. In my events role, things have obviously, like many, dramatically changed. And so we're currently refocusing and redesigning how events were once operated at Canada Health Infoway. In my other world, Canada Health Infoway is a digital healthcare organization funded by the federal government, and we've been working to roll out digital health solutions for Canadians for the last 15 plus years, and that adoption dramatically increased in the matter of a week. So our organization is incredibly busy funding projects across the country, and now, as my job as an event planner, it's to ensure that those conversations and those meetings are still taking place, but now in the virtual format that we're living in. So yeah, my other worlds exist. I'm the VP with the MPI Toronto chapter. So busy here supporting our members in Toronto and reaching out in that format as well. I'm a board member with Meetings Means Business Canada. So some work right now happening on the advocacy side with government and what we can do to support our members there as well. So.
Thank you, Christina. It's a lot on your plate right now with lots of changes and pivoting. And over to you, Tiff.
Great, thanks very much. Again, I'm Tiff Daniels with Outback Team Building and Training. I've been with the organization for over 17 years now. We've been around for 25 years. When I joined, we were very much a destination bricks and mortar style activity provider. We did whitewater rafting, we did corporate ski trips, and we did some team building activities where people came to us to be executed. And we discovered back in 2008, when the recession hit then, that we had to diversify and make programs that were scalable and executionable to any location. And from that, actually, we started then expanding across Canada and into the US, and have now become very much an international team building and training supplier. And even a couple years ago, we developed an app that enabled us to execute a proprietary program for people to execute in their location without us physically coming on site. And then about 6 months ago, even before COVID, we decided to do some virtual team building, whereby you might have a group in a boardroom at a hotel, and rather than us fly in or show up on site, we would get on the monitor on the video screen and be the facilitator or help execute the program on site for the group. And so obviously when this all started to occur, our in-person meetings went from quite a bit to basically zero, as we're all discovering. But we're lucky enough to be able to take some of the things we learned from doing these virtual team building programs to the group, and now pivot so it's virtual team building to multiple participants, as we are doing right now, where everyone's sitting at their home, potentially some individuals at a standalone office, but that's where we've been able to pivot to. Our only challenge, though, is that because of this is very new for so many people and so many organizations, they're still trying to learn how to experience this new way of communicating, a new way of getting together. So the first few weeks we were scrambling. We've been using Zoom internally for a number of years and externally for about 6 months, but we then suddenly realized there's all these providers that are using MS Teams, they're using Citrix, they're using WebEx, they're using a multitude of video conferencing tools. And every day we have a customer say, oh, how about use this one? And that then becomes a new challenge for us, because how do we then help that customer execute them when we're working with them? So that's a new learning aspect for us. But yeah, so we're all learning something new every day. I'm interested in some of the questions and discussions we'll have, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Tiff. And over to you, Greg.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you for having me, Tourism Burnaby. So I work with MMGY NextFactor. We work with Destinations International, which is the International Trade Association for tourism boards like Tourism Burnaby. And we put together something called Destination Next, which is probably the most high-level sort of overview of trends driving the global visitor economy. So when COVID happened, we started talking with every tourism board leader we could across North America. And just yesterday, we launched something called Organization Next on Destination International's CEO call. And it's really a short-term strategic plan for tourism boards over the next 6 to 18 months. And it's really this idea that no one has any resources anymore. All of a sudden, there's all this new demands on the organization. So how do we work with directors and stakeholders and boards of directors to really identify and prioritize what strategies can be done? That's the short term. On the long term, working with Destination Canada and other organizations for 5 to 10 year overarching destination master plans, working with Destination Canada now. And it's really, how will destinations differentiate themselves and leverage the creativity and innovation in their communities, where community is really the brand, experiences are commodities, it's the people behind those experiences, and the creativity and innovation aligned with sort of big picture themes. I'm a Canadian citizen living in the US, and a friend of mine said, you know, when you look at Canada, there's not a lot there that we can't find in the US. If you're showing mountains and streams and craft beer trails, we can find all that in Colorado or Pittsburgh. It has to be about ideas. It has to be about feelings, right? And so what does that actually look like, and how can destinations sell that and capture that in their communities? So that's sort of a rough overview of what I do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg. So we'll jump right into the first question for the panel. And it's, as we discover our new normal, what is your advice and how we should adapt to those changes? So you mentioned some of the things that you're currently doing with each of your businesses, but as advice to the audience and the attendees that's on the call right now, how should we adapt to what's happening to us right now? Anyone want to jump in, or should I pick someone?
No, I can start just to get the ball rolling. So, you know, having spoken with tourism board, and I'll use tourism board versus DMO or what have you, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the language, but no one knows what step, what foot to put forward right now. There was the initial triage where everyone had to let go of people and sort of pool resources and start driving business continuity to local restaurants. But now as we sort of move from response to recovery, there's a lot of question marks. So we look to destinations that are doing it well. In the US, you look at Fort Worth, that came right out in early March. And because of the strength they had and the relationships they had in their community, were able to come out with a lot of different types of content to support local businesses, local creatives, because they've already sort of been at the forefront of this idea of aligning government, tourism, and community leaders around sort of shared goals and values. In Canada, you look at Victoria, Canada, phenomenal job between Mayor Lisa Helps with her Victoria 3.0 economic development plan, and what Paul Nursey is doing there with Greater Destination Victoria. And then Victoria Clark out in St. John, Newfoundland. She actually had their non-tourism industry come to her, the shipping company. There's a big logistics shipping industry there. And they said, we want to work with you. And they came up with this idea of putting a bunch of shipping containers on the dock to use as kind of a backdrop for drive-in movies. But they came to her, which just speaks a lot to that community building that's already happened. What's happening now, we're seeing other communities are really starting to, because they're focusing so much more on their local residents, are starting to establish and expand those networks, either maintaining what they have or more likely building on what is already there, and then thinking about how they can leverage that to sort of position the destination moving forward.
Thank you. Bev or Chris or Christina or Tiff, would you like to add to that in terms of your advice and how we should adopt the changes?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tiff.
Sorry, I was going to just add to that in the sense that, I think what Greg was saying, a lot of alignment between different sectors and different industries. And in the last few days, because I was saying a lot of our team building programs are scalable and modifiable to any location, we've been reaching out to a lot of bricks and mortar or destination specific team building providers and activity providers to see if we can work together to help their customers, or vice versa. Maybe they have some ideas that we can help each other on. So I think it's kind of the same idea, is how do you go out to the community and the industry and work together to with a common goal of trying to all survive and try to find some solutions to what the next reality is going to be.
Yeah,
Thanks, Tiff. And Chris, go ahead, sorry.
I'm chomping at the bit here. No, this is just to kind of also say, to kind of add what Tiff and Greg were saying as well. Mike Tyson famously said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think that's really what's happened to us. And what's made us realize at Tourism Burnaby are all the holes in our organizations, all the things that like we thought we were marketing geniuses for the last 6 years in this economy, but that's not the case. And we realize that we have opportunities that we've missed in connecting with different stakeholders. So whether that be, being on a first name basis with all the restaurateurs in town, or whether it be, having conducted research so that we can really speak to the true value of tourism within our communities. Those are things that are missing that we're going to have to really focus on in the coming months. And I don't think any of us are coming out of this unscathed, but nobody's coming out of this alone. So really in the next few weeks and months, and hopefully not years, it's really going to be about building those partnerships in our community so we stay strong, because we certainly didn't have our shipping community come to us and offer to set up a drive-in in Burnaby. So we've got some work to do.
Thank you, Chris.
I think too that this new next normal, whatever that is also, there could be so many distractions out there. I'm sure, everyone on this call has been told in one way or another what we should be considering, what we should be doing. And I've kind of been in this industry a long time. It seems everything affects this industry, whether it's SARS, H1N1, a frickin' volcano in Iceland. I mean, it's just nonstop, and you learn to be an amazing problem solver. But one of the things I've learned over the years is to be able to be flexible, and there are no sacred cows. And so, what was your normal 6 weeks ago truly is not now. And every time something like this has happened in my career, we've come out of it at least with nuggets of betterness, for lack of a better word. And we need to be open to that. But I think at the same time, there's a lot of distractions out there. So you need to be very, very firm on what your purpose is and not get distracted into, what other people are doing. It has to work for you. It has to work for your destination and your stakeholders and your partners, and stay focused, but at the same time, be willing to pivot and look at all areas of your business. And like you were saying, Chris, is listen to your stakeholders in your community, because they are coming to you with problems. And it's really easy to be, super popular when life is good and the money's flowing and visitors are coming and business is thriving. But you can really shine when the what hits the fan, and you're standing out there supporting your community and truly being that advocate for what business needs, not simply in the tourism sector, but those second and third sectors as well that do support our industry. So those are my big learnings: is be flexible, but at the same time, know your role and know your purpose.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bev. And Christina, did you want to add anything to that question?
Yeah, I think that you kind of the same thing. It's just, as a planner, we like to have things pretty lined up, and forecasting and predicting what the future looks like is one of our main skill sets, I think. But this is a time of absolute flexibility and just kind of rolling with it. For the planners that are on the call, and I think it's just understanding still what your core business objectives are, or in any business, what your core business, and how are you going to be able to deliver to what your organization or your stakeholders need. So whether it be networking or education or thought leadership that you're looking to have, you can still you can adapt and you can deliver those business objectives, but it just in a flexible, different format than what you may be used to normally have done. So not trying to replicate anything, but being a little innovative and trying it in different ways.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone, for the first round of questions. We'll move on to the next one. And there's a trend out there right now, and most of you mentioned it in your responses. And right now, basically, we see a lot of sharing between similar businesses, reaching out and sharing best practices, and hey, what are you doing? And how can we adapt those same best practices? Can you share any insights in terms of how you are sharing your knowledge with different business sectors or similar business sectors currently? Should we start with maybe Greg again?
Okay, so all of our work is transparent and public, and we're sharing that with everyone, but any kind of strategies we come up with have been co-created with tourism leaders nationwide. So it's all about building consensus, seeing what's worked for a lot of different communities, trying to establish some commonalities, and then putting that out toward the industry. For example, you have the tourism leaders in Portland, San Francisco, and Seattle working with their state leaders to really sort of cross-promote each other. If everyone's going to be driving, for the first year, perhaps, how can they work together to cross-promote how people should drive through the organization or through the area? I brought the same up with Seth a couple of days ago and Nancy Small in Richmond, the same idea that it's not just collaboration within the city, but across cities. So how can what's working in one city help potentially what's working in another city? For example, you have in Victoria, the Food Eco District, where it's a very sort of package and promotion of the entire supply chain and a circular economy, and it's pretty cool. So how could that potentially help all of the food industries and supply chains and all the other destinations package that for people that are driving around, and everyone kind of sort of build on each other's knowledge? So we're trying to find examples like that destinations can start looking at right out of the box for the first customers that are coming.
Chris?
Okay. You see me leaning in here? Well, no, I was thinking just in sharing in general. Like, so if we look at the great financial crisis back in 2008, 2009, really this new modern sharing economy kind of grew out of that, saying I've got 5 hours between dinner and bedtime and a car in the driveway, voila, Uber. I've got a roommate and I can't make rent, but we've got this couch, Airbnb is born. And so I think that out of necessity, we just kind of look at, what do we have lying around here? And I think as destinations and hotels and, just in general, we're going to kind of have to take a closer look at that and how we can share that out. Meaning, let's say I've got, you know, different organizations within the city that I know are going for retreats elsewhere. Well, I've kind of left them untouched because, you know, they're not going to meet in Burnaby. That's not super helpful to my stakeholders. But I bet they'd love to go up to Kamloops for a retreat. And Bev, maybe you've got a meeting or two that needs to come down towards Metro Vancouver. So I think those partnerships and potentially sister cities, especially as we move towards just that regional travel and those road trips rather than long haul air, are going to be really, really important as we enter the first stages of recovery here.
Thank you. Bev or Christina or Tiff, would you like to add to that question?
Yeah, I mean, mine really come down to, I just feel the word task force and committees is just popping up everywhere. I think that, on all levels, these little, task force and committees are being created to kind of share information and solve problems quickly. So I think, that's one of the new buzzwords we're hearing. And I think of like tools that, within my associations we're using, things like MPI Global has made all of their education offerings available to anybody. You don't have to be a member right now. So that's just an easy resource that people can reach out just for further professional development. Things like MPI Toronto have created online forums where all members have access to a group chat that you can share information, whether you're a supplier, planner, or looking for recommendations or best advice. So I think those tools that we're creating and webinars and stuff like that are just the essential tools to kind of getting that information out there and sharing what's happening in the moment.
Thank you. And Bev or Tiff, would you like to add to the question of shared insights or additional examples of what you're able to do?
So what, we look to, we're Kamloops. We don't have these massive resources and research data and things. We work closely with Greg and his team on the strategy piece. But I find I have always liked to draft behind bigger organizations, Destination Canada, Destination BC for here in British Columbia. And, organizations, really aligning ourselves with those industry organizations like TIA BC, TIAC, BC DMOA. These folks have relative information to at least our world. And what we find is, they're the ones that can expend the most energy and resources towards some of these recovery or situations that we find ourselves in right now. So whatever that we determine is relevant to Kamloops, we will draft behind what they're doing as opposed to recreating and spending limited resources we have. So we always look to those that are doing things already. We like to be considered leaders, but we will lead in our community with those that make sense for us and use the resources and draft behind those that have greater resources, but literally aligned objectives and goals. And I found that's really bode well for us over time and the best utilization of our resources.
Great. Thank you. And Tiff?
Yeah, I manage a group of sales team, and regrettably, it's a lot smaller today than it was 6 weeks ago. But we, even though they're sales representatives, we call them engagement consultants, because that's ultimately what we're trying to provide our customers an engaging experience that creates alignment and helps them as an organization. But my most senior representative engagement consultant, he's a fantastic individual, and he always talks about the law of reciprocity. And that's, I think, what I'm hearing from a lot of people here is you're giving something, not necessarily because you expect something back, but if you do give something, you probably will get something back, even if it's for free. You're not going to get gainfully anything out of it immediately. And I think that's what kind of situation we're in right now. And a common sort of thread I'm hearing from people is that you've got to help others, and in due course, that'll help you, and it'll help everybody and help the community. So the law of reciprocity is something I'm thinking a lot about today, and it's just trying to help our partners and our customers get through this and try to find solutions.
I mean, the whole Canadian, Destination Canada's whole new brand for Glowing Hearts is completely baked in that idea of reciprocity. and that visitors coming to Canada benefit in the process, but also Canadians in that interaction, or whether it's province to province, everyone's benefiting in that engagement. And so how do you steward that? And how do you connect communities in a more intentional way, perhaps? And how do you start looking at the people and the ideas, and this idea that tourism is, and this is from Destination Canada, tourism is the sharing economy of ideas. How do you start promoting that and selling that, and marketing that, versus just your experiences, spaces, places, that kind of thing? So I think this idea of reciprocity is something that would be great for all of us to really think about more and talk about more in the future.
And if you don't mind me just adding to that, Greg, as well, is the idea is people talk about within organizations silos, and the same thing can happen not just within a organization, but between these organizations, because obviously throughout our country and others that you have these organizations that have their own responsibilities for their destination, but really they should be sharing or trying to figure out how to share that information, those experiences you just addressed more so they're not living in that silo.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Great points. Thank you. We're going to actually go into the next question, and it's really about so the question is understanding the impact of COVID-19 in a regional and global level. How do you see the events and meeting being executed? So we know that COVID impacts each city, each community very differently, and the rates in terms of who is confirmed or who has maybe covered were all different. So for example, in Ontario, we're right now about 5,000 cases. Actually, I have some numbers here. I did have some numbers. Where did it go? Anyhow, we'll ignore that for a sec. So for example, right now, if we look at the picture of Canada, there is about, in Quebec is our highest province in terms of the impact of COVID, being about 20,000 people having COVID. And then in Ontario is the next highest impact. And when we look at BC, you're less than 2,000 people impacted. So there's a big variance in terms of how COVID has impacted you. But at the end of the day, we're all doing social distancing. And when we need to be ready to plan events again, how do you see us starting those baby steps in terms of planning what the future looks like? Because everyone's future may start at different time frames because our impacts are different from a regional and a global perspective. Did I ran on too much? So just to reframe the question again, it's so understanding the impact of COVID-19 in different regions and global level. How do you see events and meetings being executed? Christina, do you want to jump into this one? Because I know you have your planner hat on.
Sure. Yeah. I think, there's certainly a lot of hesitation when that day will come, and myself being based in Toronto and Ontario and my organization being spread across the country, it's going to create a lot of challenges. And not just internally, but externally, what are our stakeholders and their rules and regulations going to be around travel in the future? And on an individual level, what are the comfort level, whether your physical or your family implications of you traveling. So it's going to take a lot of time. It's not going to go back to business as usual for a very, very long time. So to speak in the distant future, I see small gatherings at local levels. I still see heavy use of digital technology, creating satellite locations potentially to connect people still on that national or potentially international level. Lots of different, features certainly going to be taken into consideration. I know all the hotel partners are currently coming up with their manuals of what that looks like, and I've seen some of those, and they're sharing those now about how new room setups and physical distancing can take place still in those setups. New positions for traffic control cops in meetings and venues, the flow of traffic. There'll be legal implications, and Greg, maybe you see this more in the States than in Canada, but will we all be signing waivers before we step into a venue, because we could be putting nobody wants to take on the risk or liability, or as a meeting planner or professional, what's my risk or liability if somebody does become infected or a spread happens. So, you know, lots of more tactical things for sure from a venue side, but those are some of the big things and considerations in the future that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, and from the hotel side, from what we've heard, Hilton and Marriott are, and it's a few other brands, are unwilling to say that people have to wear masks, like JetBlue just came out with recently. But at the same time, everyone kind of sees that's where we're going. And all the conversations with all the different organizations, the big black hole are the big meetings. When are they coming back? And we're, you know, people are talking in terms of years. So again, everyone's looking at the short meetings, regional meetings, smaller meetings. And a lot of talk about the digital side. And just as a case study, I was ready to go to South by Southwest a couple of months ago. They canceled a week before. Now, what they did after a couple of weeks later, they said, "We'll defer your payment, and you can have next year for free and half for the next year." They could have kept half of my money, which is about $1,400, if they would have shared the content they had, because all the decks were prepared, all the speakers were ready to go. It was all this content that I could use, some fascinating stuff. So there was money left on the table. Now I can't speak for South by. It's a fantastic organization. Maybe it was too much to turn around on a short time frame, but there was a lot of money that they could have had. Now you look at City Nation Place, which is another event, was in West Hollywood last year. I went to that, paid $800. It was supposed to be in Toronto this year. They pivoted and said, "Look, we want to keep half of your money. We want to keep $400, and we're going to put on the show, and all the people in Toronto that were involved are going to stay involved." And it's going to be very interesting to see, that's next week or the week after, how that is being put together. And as having paid for that, there's certain expectations. It's definitely not about the experiences, right? It's about custom content, and I can help co-create the event, which is happening, and really start customizing the journey through that event and really elevate the ROI. So just this idea that hybrid meetings or virtual technology, there could be something that we could look at as an industry to drive some revenue. It will never not compete with face-to-face at all, but there are opportunities there.
I think I might just add as well. So prior to being with Tourism Burnaby, I worked in group sales for hotels for about 15 years with Marriott and Fairmont and Pan Pacific. And I have a couple of concerns as we move forth into meetings. So for meetings to be viable, a lot of it is volume based. And so if you're looking at, you know, a meeting space that was designed for 40 people, but you can now really only facilitate 10 in it and respect social distancing, that's a bit of a challenge. So creating that profitability. And then in terms of what's that experience look like for them? So are people coming into the room sitting at rounds of 3 instead of rounds of 10? Are they sitting classroom style? And then for the dining experience, are they just picking up prepackaged meals on the side? Because I think, you know, the days of buffets are gone and handshakes are out of here. So what's that experience look like that makes people actually want to meet, you know, in the future? And that's something that I'm kind of struggling with every day. Is like, is there any benefit to meeting in person right now versus a Zoom call? And what's that going to look like in the coming weeks?
And then the solvency issues, right? If you can only bring half the people back, or restaurants, if you can only operate half capacity, you can't remain viable. You know, margins aren't there. So what does that mean long term? So it's a big question.
Lots to think about for sure. Does anyone else want to add to that, or we can move on to the next question? We're good? Okay. So the next question is, in order to thrive with the new normal, whenever that's going to become, what are the recommended training strategies that we should consider, especially when we think about currently when we're ready to go back into the business? There's a lot of employees that needs to be onboarded again. And when they're onboarded, there's a lot of new training in terms of the standards of social distancing, the safety measures, and the cleaning processes. What should that look like? And what are the strategies that we should recommend for everyone that's listening today?
Okay, I can start just quickly. There's no money, there's no one traveling, and the return is going to be slow, and there's going to be just insane competition for a very limited pool of customers. And those customers are going to have not as much money as they once did. So what do you have? You have a lot of ideas and knowledge. You look at Burnaby, sorry, I went to BCIT. You have Simon Fraser. You have incredible ideas and energy and innovation and creativity. Kamloops, there's the Innovation Lab, and having been there, there's this young, vibrant energy to do something amazing. In Richmond, that whole Steveston area and what they're doing around sustainability and food, just like Victoria, and then Victoria's Economic Development Plan, this whole idea of wrapping a city and the whole southwestern BC in terms of a connected ecosystem that really has a lot of global fluency. You got all these brains, so I think now is the time to start really connecting those, and business development starts happening and partnerships start happening when you start bringing really smart and innovative people together. So I would just say that's like step one, which everyone can start today, like you're doing now.
I think when we start to onboard again or re-onboard, you know, it's a matter of doing more with less. And so traditional roles within your organization is having the conversations with your folks internally and saying, we now need you to do these things. And so there's a lot of free training out there, to Christina's point, you even on the MPI front, but there's a lot of resources out there. And so, you know, we're not going to have the funds to use consultants like we did in the past, or agencies like we did in the past. We're going to have to do a lot of this work with the resources that we have, at least for the next few years. So for us, it will be personal development on expanding your existing role, talents, and skills so that we can maintain business and we can continue to market and you utilize those existing resources in different ways, and cross-training and consolidating roles. For instance, our graphic designer has never edited video really before to speak of, and we gave her some B-roll for this specific video we needed, and my God, I was totally blown away. So there's hidden talents within. So although we won't have this huge budget for professional development moving forward, I think there are opportunities to invest in the people that we have now, do more with less, and really encourage them to stretch themselves, like we're all having to stretch, to go beyond what their traditional roles are into new roles that will support sustainability of our industry.
That's a great response, Bev. Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I mean, we're definitely in uncharted waters. That's in my, I have two phrases that are in the drinking games I play on these calls. One of them is pivot and the other is uncharted waters. So if you're drinking at home, go ahead. But one of the things that I think that this does have in common with prior downturns is the recovery does share some commonalities. So the things that you do when you're coming out of a downturn is you focus on maintaining those clients that you already have, stealing share from your competitors, and then building loyalty. So during this downtime, I think those are key things that you want to be just really understanding. Loyalty, what it is to bring those people, and then understanding who those first travelers are going to be back. And it's not going to be business travelers, it's going to be leisure travelers, it's going to be Generation Z, who are attracted by the lower price points of travel in a way that they haven't been before, and the boomers, like my mom. My mom was about to go on a round the world cruise, and she canceled it in the second week of March. So those boomers have got stuff on their bucket list they want to get done, and they're gonna be back out there, and they've got the funds to do it. So I think those organizations that understand that demographic shift and those different types of business are the ones that are going to flourish in the new reality.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Christina or Tiff?
Yeah. To add to, I think Beverley was talking about utilizing resources to cross-train through different departments. I mean, I know within our organization, we're seeing that we're probably going to have to do that. But the other part too is in other organizations that there might be people that aren't even on site to train the people with the skill set to train those on site might be at a different location. So just like we're doing now, I think video training and could increase. And then with that, what are the intricacies of the video training? You know, you don't have the social cues, the body language isn't as noticeable. People potentially, if you're training a number of people in one room at the same time, they could get distracted. You've got to deal with how to do that type of, or have that type of training moving forward. And maybe there's different type of sort of compliance or testing or different methodologies going to be used if you're not physically on site or not able to walk people through exact examples of whatever you're trying to train them on. So a different way of education moving forward.
Christina, did you want to add to that, or should?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I know it's the same stuff. And Bev, you made a great point. I mean, as planners, you know, my organization, we're fortunate to still be employed, but it is a case of being flexible and willing to take on different roles. And you know, there's lots of amazing skill sets in this industry, and project management and leadership and you know, communications are all skill sets that we have to do our daily jobs, and those are skill sets that are still being needed and for other roles. And so just being flexible to take on whatever it is that comes up, and looking at it really as a learning and development opportunity for your own self personally and professionally, you know, kind of going with it and making the best of that.
Thank you, Christina. Really, really great responses. Very inspired in terms of all the strategies and tactics and ways that we should think and move forward. So thank you very much, everyone. We're going to open up the Q&A to the attendees right now. And Seth, I believe you have a couple individuals that has indicated that they have a question.
Yeah, I'm gonna just pass it off to first. I'm gonna pass it off to Jane, and then Vivian had a question, and I believe Hafiz had a question as well. So I'm gonna give Jane the floor here. Jane, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I actually had attended a webinar a few weeks ago, earlier on in the whole course of events here, with the Urban Land Institute, and it was with the tourism representatives from Cascadia. And one of the things that seemed to kind of filter up to the top was that, and granted this was a couple of weeks ago, that for the future traveling public, whether it be business or otherwise, is that safety is going to be more important than price. And so I just wanted to find out what your thoughts, you have touched on it a little bit already, but what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I can go. You know, when we had a full day strat session yesterday about scenario one, when we do start, you know, slowly local start movement within the area to begin that recovery, what are they looking for? And what are those touch points? So for instance, wine tasting. How do you know, you can see in front where the people might be using gloves, or there might be masks on or whatever as people start to move, those sorts of visual things. But what's happening behind the scenes before you get that glass? Like what happens with the wine bottles? And, you know, we're kind of going to be coming out in paranoia on, you know, we don't want to be the person that starts this in our area all over again. And so I think there is going to be a real push towards speaking to the traveling public and to the locals about cleanliness. And we used to talk about the path to purchase, but maybe it's the path to re-exploring. And, you know, a hotel room, do you touch the remote control? Do you come in there with your Lysol wipes? Do you bring your own pillow? Like, what does that look like? And I think those are very real concerns. And before we start marketing beautiful landscapes and pretty pictures, we do have to address the reality of the situation and the scope of what we've just come out of, because it's been traumatic and people are going to be afraid. The other thing too is we need to have conversations with our community about welcoming visitors back into our community, and you know what it looks like to go to a gas station, and what does it look like to open up a restaurant, and the social distancing. It's going to be a different sort of initial marketing. And I don't know, Greg, I'm sure you guys have talked about it, but I don't believe it's going to be pretty pictures and landscapes and sunsets of couples holding hands walking down the river. It's going to be very much, what are you doing to make sure I'm safe?
Right. So we're all sort of trust merchants now. And the number one thing is that, you know, customers trust us. And when, you know, the head of BC Health says it's okay for restaurants to open, that'll go a long way. And then restaurants and hotels will show what they're doing, both in the physical environment and online. We'll all be traveling with, you know, big science bags of cleaning products, most likely. But coming out of any pandemic, and I guess especially this one, it's like, talk to me like I'm 5, hold my hand. You know, I want to know what's open, what are the facilities like in your restaurant, how often is stuff being cleaned? Because there might be questions that we want to ask, but we're afraid to because they seem too basic or you know, too much focused on germs or what have you. So really coming out with the most basic, and this was on the Metro Vancouver call, really, really basic information, because that's what people are going to want to start with.
Seth, do you want to move on to the next question?
Sure. I'm just gonna give.
Good
Did anyone else want to speak to that as well, just before?
I will. I think just in general, from a leisure traveler perspective, I think that, you know, depending on the different risk groups and whatnot, I think that price and safety will be important. I think that unfortunately, you know, price will lead the way a lot of the times. I think that larger branded restaurants and hotels, like, they already have that inherent trust, so they're likely to do better on the other side of that. Where I see safety being the bigger issue during recovery is with corporate business associations, that type of thing, because I would be terrified to send any of my team anywhere where I thought they might get sick or something bad might happen to them, because I'm concerned about their personal well-being, but B, also I'm responsible for the organization. I don't want to expose us and to potential lawsuits either. So I mean, there's that part when you think of a large organization, let's say like Microsoft or Google, sending a large number of people to South by or something like that. Like, those are major concerns for them, and I think those will need to be addressed before we see that large group travel come back.
Anyone else want to provide some feedback on that? No?
Just quickly about price. You look at the leadership for Professional Convention Management Association, PCMA, Sheriff Karamat and Bruce McMillan. They were both at Tourism Toronto during SARS, and they said the biggest takeaway was not to discount, because it took them so long for the hotels to bring back rate integrity. So really, in terms, it's rather than discounting, all about value adds, and just build on the value on top of value, because once you start dropping rate, you know, we're talking years to bring it back sometimes.
All right, I'm just going to bring on Vivian here. Vivian, can you hear us here?
Yes, I can. So thank you, everyone. I love the candor and the sharing of what's on your minds. The question that I had was, you know, within the tourism sector or even the communities that you service, have there been discussion around pooling resources together, sharing functions, centralizing some things? Just curious if that you're noticing that trend.
There has been. I'm determining how far open we want to pull the curtain on this kind of thing. I mean, there's definitely these discussions do happen, especially with smaller organizations really suffering for funding as this carries out, and it's sort of an indeterminate amount of time. So I think that government at whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal level really appreciates the size and the scope of what tourism means, and they're eager to help. But at the same time, compared to other industries, like let's say oil or forestry, there are just so many different organizations and so many different special interests involved. It is a challenge for them to kind of wade through that quagmire and come up with solutions that are going to benefit a lot of the smaller organizations as it comes through. So the answer to your question is yes, it's happening. And I would say we have seen some progress, but personally, I think it's happening a little bit slower than I would like. And I don't know, I don't want to say anything else on the record when it comes to that, but I think that gives you a little bit of an indication of the level of discussions that are taking place right now.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone else want to address Vivian's question, or we're good with that one? Okay, Seth, over to you for the next participant questions.
So Haviz has typed this in. Haviz, can you also introduce yourself, give just a quick, what organization you're with? I just forgot that for the last two.
Sure, am I on?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I work at a company in Calgary, and my question is, assume the eventual recovery will be uneven, are there any travel types that you think will rebound quicker than others? So I'm thinking the travel typical ones are business, MICE, VFR. How would you rank likelihood of the back to normal for each of these?
So we talked earlier about how, meetings, MICE meetings, incentives, congresses, exhibitions will be, in terms of large groups, probably the last. VFR, visiting friends and relatives, leisure, near proximity travel will be the first to come back. The business one's interesting. I'm already being asked to start flying. I don't want to fly, but at the same time, I want to make a living. So, maybe I get on the plane with a hazmat suit, but I think business travel could come back more than some people think because people are eager to do business. So it'll be interesting to see leisure versus business. But I think at the very beginning, it's anyone with money. Anyone that has the funds to be able to get in a car and go buy a hotel is going to get out on the road. And we have this conversation about defining, the new traveler and how they're changed. Those first 3 to 6 months, I think a lot of us are going to be the same in what we're looking for. We want some open space. We want to feel safe. We want to be able to connect with the community on a limited, example. We want to be able to retreat when we want because there's going to be a big shift coming out of nothing and reintroducing to society for some people. There's this talk about younger people more likely to get out there. That could be, I don't know. So that's just some sort of really surface level thoughts about that.
I think too, it's not necessarily corporate versus leisure versus to Greg's point. It's, it's more geographical as far as I can see. It's going to kind of be like your sphere of influence almost. It's going to be, we're going to start seeing movement within those 2 to 3 hour drive markets, and they may just come for the day. Or the sneakers, we're going to sneak out to go camping where nobody is and do it kind of under the wire. And then things will start to open up and you'll see it spread more and more. But I think, we do continue to have construction crews in Kamloops. We do continue to have government employees in Kamloops right now. So there is kind of that corporate traveler. But I think more so than sector is going to be geographical movement that will come first. And, it's just what we're feeling.
I'll jump in on this, and great to hear from you, Hafiz. Hafiz and I worked together years ago. From working in Banff and Lake Louise back in 2008, 2009, what we saw for the urban and resort areas was that sort of, as Greg was alluding to, that top tier traveler that's got money that wants to travel, they're going to come back. And so what we noticed in those hotels is that our suite product and our restaurants were full of those type of travelers. Our base model or our base rooms were empty, but in town, the hostels, the 3 stars were also full. So I think at either end of the spectrum, it's those leisure travelers that are either looking for that great deal to come back and experience something they wouldn't have been able to prior to the pandemic, or that pent up demand for people that have that that extra spending power, and that big middle is sort of what's going to be missing for the first few months. Where I have heard rumblings, and it's really going to depend on how international travel rolls up, but out of China, like Western Canada, just in general, is a very desirable destination, especially the way that we've been handling our pandemic. So there'll be, I think, when we move to tour business, there'll be strong demand out of there, but it's going to be very, very low rated. So there might be an opportunity for those fenced rates to go to that tour group as the international borders start to open up. But that'd be my take on it.
Anyone else? Or
Yeah, even on the business side, like I said, I think, it's further down the road. But I think it really is going to depend on sector. You know, anybody who's fully capable of operating remotely and really gotten used to this style will continue to do so as long as they can, versus some of the other different industries who don't adapt as quickly or haven't preferred the adoption to virtual connections. They'll come back obviously sooner. So we know the Facebooks and the Microsofts, they're not coming back for a long time because they're fully capable of operating in this sphere, and this is their comfort zone. So other industries potentially sooner.
Yeah, to add to what Christina said is that we're hearing the same thing from those companies, which are some of our top corporate clients. And so we're looking at how do we pivot to maybe as well small, medium-sized businesses that are still looking for activities, team building, training, who might be getting together, because still all this remote type of business is not the norm for them, even though they've had to adapt. They want to get back to the norm more quickly than the larger organizations where it's very much ingrained in their culture.
Okay, Connie, I think we have we're just going a little over. We have one more question here from Beck. I'm just gonna put Beck on the line here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was definitely a very knowledgeable panel and the experts in the industry, you know, sharing their expert opinion. So my question, as being a hotelier, I do represent Executive Hotels and Resorts based out of Vancouver, BC. Understanding that the new norm was going to be different, although everybody's trying to be optimistic as possible, the new norm and the new business volume for the tourism industry will definitely shift and reduce. It could be 30%, it could be 40 or 50%. We don't know yet. But considering that, you know, the restaurants cannot survive, you know, below 50 or 50, 60% capacity of the clientele, hotels are going to be actually in a more difficult situation, considering that, especially if they do not own the property or the real estate. Do you think that as a lot of the hotels may decide to repurpose their accommodation to be long-term residential accommodation, considering that you know, long-term residential properties are actually in higher demand, especially in Metro Vancouver area or Toronto per se?
Oh, Greg, you need to unmute.
Sorry, I can't speak to the economics of that. That's a you know, real estate valuation and whatnot. But for those large hotels that have 50, 60% group versus transient that rely on that group business, and destinations where, you know, I don't know Canada so much, but Phoenix, Fort Worth, Nashville that have over 50% group, if they're not getting those big 5,000, 10,000 groups, then those hotels can't remain solvent. So I don't see how they have any other opportunity. But specifically in Vancouver, where there's so much demand for residential, it would suggest that that's where we're going, you know, sooner than later. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
I'll jump in as well, just to some sort of region specific. The other that's sort of related to this off the top is also short-term rentals, which is something we haven't really talked about so much on this call. So they're Airbnbs. And what we've seen in the past few months is if you go on like Kijiji or Craigslist right now, there are anywhere from about 400 to 600 furnished rentals for long-term available, which you would not have seen 3-4 months ago. So it's to me that's clearly Airbnb. And from my AirDNA reporting that I get, we're showing that sort of for the first time since ever really, we're starting to see a decrease in those units. So I think that will kind of address some of that shorter term demand. And then I think part of that is also the additional demand for long-term housing is going to depend on how long our borders are closed to immigration, because that's the other thing that's sort of driven that demand for increased housing and housing prices in the Lower Mainland. And then, I mean, there's kind of a lot of layers to this. And then we've got a lot of the not a lot, but some of the 3-star hotels on the Vancouver side that are now turning into temporary housing for the homeless population. So it's going to be hard when it's time to check out. So I don't see that as being as probably as short term as as they probably think. So I think there will be that demand, and we're in a market that had a real shortage of hotel rooms based on our meeting space and the demand for the region. So hoping that the owners, if they're able to remain solvent for 2 or 3 years, are going to see that demand come roaring back, and there's going to be more demand for especially a full service hotel than I think there probably was prior to this.
Thank you, Chris. I think we're definitely over time now. And just as a final wrap up, I want to say thank you so much to all of our panel speakers. I think you've been very insightful, and you've got everyone that's listening very engaged. So thank you. As a final question, this is going to be a fun one, hopefully. When social distancing is lifted, what are you personally going to do as your number one top thing on your list? Someone we asked this question in another meeting. He said he's going to run to his favorite bar and have 4 pints of beer. So it could be anything that you like.
I definitely like that one. Maybe play poker with my buddies.
Poker's with your buddy, Tiff. Okay. Greg?
Just get in the car with my wife and go explore, the state like I haven't before, and check out all the places I've, told myself I'd go, and just start talking to people and, sharing stories. I think just something as simple as that.
Very nice. And Bev?
Gonna hop on that ferry to Victoria and see my grandson.
Oh, that big hug that's missed, right?
Yeah.
And Christina?
I mean this in the nicest way. I'm going to drop my daughter off to her grandfather's house.
And Chris?
It is those small things. I'm going to take my family out and take my mom out for a nice dinner.
Very nice. And Tiff?
Yeah, it was catch up with some buddies, and as Greg said, share some stories, because it's been a while.
It's been a while. And Seth, do you want to share one too?
My thing is, I want my in-laws here actually, because, I've mentioned this to Chris, but I've got this big yard now, right? That needs so I've got this credit to Air Canada. So, hey, I'm waiting, I'm eagerly waiting. So
it's your own guest workers program.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Mine is going to the garden center and picking up more plants to add to my green room here. So thank you so much. It's been very delightful having you answer all of the great questions that we've had. So again, thank you. And next week, for those who are listening still, May 6th, we have another social hour, and we have a special guest speaker, Tom Singer, who is an expert in human connections. And the topic that he's going to focus on is social tightening in the face of uncertainty. And social tightening is really around the fact that we're so distant right now. We really need to tighten how we connect with our people. So the little conversations that we have, or the little face-to-face that we can't do right now, there's still other ways that we can connect. So next week will be that focus. We hope you can join us again. And to all of our panelists, thank you so much for your time today and for your insight. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll be sending the recording out. And this has been really great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.